writing in the 17th century, was quite happy to the rest his ethical system on the benevolence of God. But Enlightenment thinkers sought a foundation for ethics that did not depend on divine revelation or on God's enforcement. It was as though somebody had offered a prize, like the prize that lured early aviators to undertake daring journeys. £10,000 of sterling to the first philosopher who can come up with a single moral rule to be applied through the power of reason that can cleanly separate good from bad. Had there been such a prize, it would have gone to the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. Like Plato, Kant believed that human beings have a dual nature, part animal, part rational. The animal part of us follows the laws of nature, just as does a falling rock or a lion killing its prey. There is no morality in nature. There is only casualty. But the rational part of us, Kant said, can follow a different kind of law. It can respect rules of conduct. And so people, but not lions, can be judged morally for the degree to which they respect the right rules. What might those rules be? Here, Kant devised the cleverest trick in all moral philosophy. He reasoned that for moral rules to be law, they had to be universally applicable. If gravity worked differently for men and women, or for Italians and Egyptians, we could not speak of it as a law, but rather than searching for rules to which all people would in fact agree. A difficult task likely to produce only a few bland generalities. Kant turned the problem around and said that people should think about whatever the rules guiding their own actions could reasonably be proposed as universal law. If you are planning to break a promise that has become inconvenient, can you really propose a universal law that states people ought to break promises that have become inconvenient? Endorsing such a rule would render all promises meaningless, nor could you constantly nor could you consistently will that people cheat. It- Nor could you consistently, nor could you, nor could you, nor could you, nor could you consistently will nor could you consistently will that people cheat, lie, steal, or in any other way deprive others or in any other way deprive other people of their rights or their property. For such evil would surely come back to visit you. This simple test, which Kant the called the categorical imperative, was extraordinarily powerful. Was extraordinarily powerful. It offered to make ethics a branch of applied logic, thereby giving it the sort of certainty that secular ethics without resource to be a scarred book had always found elusive. Without resource to a scarred book or sacred. That's what? Oh, to a sacred book had always found elusive. Over the following decades, the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham challenged Kant for the hypothetical prize when Bentham became a lawyer in 1767. He was appalled by the complexity and inefficiency of English law. He set out with typical Enlightenment boldness to reconceive the entire legal and legislative system by stating clear goals and proposing the most rational means of achieving those goals. The ultimate goal of the legislation, he concluded, was the good of the people, and the more good, the better. Bentham was the father of utilitarianism, the doctrine that in all decision making, legal and personal, our goal should be the maximum total benefits. The maximum total benefit utility. But who gets the benefits is of little concern. But who gets benefits is of little concern. The arrangement between Kant and Bentham has continued ever since. Descendants of Kant, known as deontologists, from the Greek deon, obligation, try to elaborate the duties and obligations that ethical people must respect, even when their actions lead to bad outcomes. For example, you must never kill an innocent person, even if doing so will save will save 100 lives. Descendants of Bentham, known as consequentialists, 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 because they evaluate actions only by their consequences, try to work out the rules and policies that will bring about the greatest good, even when doing so will sometimes violate others' ethical principles. Go ahead and kill the one to save the 100. They say, unless it will set a bad example that leads to later problem. Despite their many differences, however, the two camps agree in important ways. They both believe in parsimony. They both believe in parsimony. Decisions should be based ultimately on one principle only, be it the categorical imperative of the maximization of utility, be it the categorical imperative of the maximization of utility. They both insist that only the rider can make such decision can that only the rider can make such decisions because moral decision making requires logical reasoning and sometimes even mathematical calculations. They both distrust into institutions into oh why did I say institutions? They both distrust intuitions and gut feelings, which they see as obstacles to great reasoning, and they both shun the particular in favor of the abstract. You don't need a rich think description of the people involved or of their beliefs and cultural traditions. You just need a few facts and a ranked list of their likes and dislikes. If you are a utilitarian, it doesn't matter what country or historical era you are in. It doesn't matter whether the people involved are your friends, your enemies, or complete strangers. The moral law, like a law of physics, works the same for all people at all times. These two philosophical approaches have made enormous contributions to legal and political theory and practice. Indeed, they helped create societies that respect individual rights, Kant, while still working efficiently for the good of the people, Bentham, Betham, Betham, Bentham. But these ideas have also permitted Western cultures more generally, where they have had some unintended consequences. The philosopher Edmund Penkoff has argued that consequentialists and deontologists work together to convince Westerners in the 20th century that morality is the study of moral quandaries and dilemmas, where the Greeks where the Greeks focused on the character of a person and asked we should uh, what kind of person we should each aim to become. Modern ethics focuses on actions, asking when a particular action is right or wrong. Philosopher, Philosophers wrestle with life and death dilemmas. Kill one to save five, allow abortion fetus to be used as a source of stem cell, remove the feeding tube from a woman who has been unconscious for 15 years. Non-philosophers wrestle with smaller quandaries. Pay my taxes when others are cheating. Turn in a wallet full of money that appears to belong to a drug dealer. Tell my spouse about a sexual indiscretion. This turn from character ethics to quandary ethics has turned moral education away from virtues and towards moral reasoning. If morality is about dilemmas, then moral education is training in problem solving. Children must be taught how to think about moral problems, especially how to overcome their natural egoism and take into their calculation the needs of others. As the United States became more ethically diverse in the 1970s and 1980s, and also more averse to authoritarianism methods of education, authoritarianism methods of education, the idea of teaching specific moral factors, also of teaching specific moral facts and values went out of fashion. Instead, the rationalist legacy of quandary ethics gave us teachers and many parents who would enthusiastically endorse this line from a recent child rearing handbook. My approach does not teach children what and what not to do and why, but rather it teaches them how to think so they can decide for themselves what and what not to do and why. I believe that this turn from character to quandary was a profound mistake for, for two reasons. First, it weakens morality and limits its scope. Where the ancients saw virtue and character at work in everything a person does. Our modern conception confines morality to a set of situations that arise for each person only a few times in any given week. Trade-offs between self-interest and the interest of others in our thin restricted modern conception. A moral person is one who gives to charity, helps others, plays by the rules, and in general does not put her own self interest too far ahead of others. Most of the activities and decisions of life are therefore insulated from moral concerns. When morality is reduced to the opposite of self interest, however, the virtue hypothesis becomes paradoxical. In modern terms, the virtue hypothesis says that acting against your self interest is in your self interest. It's hard to convince people that this is true, and it can't possibly be true in all situations. In his time, Ben Franklin had a much easier task when he mm, extolled the virtue hypothesis. Like the Asians, he had a thinker rich notion or virtues as a garden of excellence that a person cultivates to become more effective and appalling to others. Seen in this way, virtue is obviously its own reward. Franklin's example implicitly posed this question for his contemporaries and his descendants. Are you willing to work now for your own later well-being, or are you so lazy and short-sighted that you won't make the effort? The second problem with the turn to moral reasoning is that it relies on bad psychology. It relies on bad psychology. Many moral education efforts since the 1970s take the rider off of the elephant and trains him to solve problems on his own. After being exposed to hours of case studies, classroom discussions about moral dilemmas, and videos about people who faced dilemmas and made the right choices, the child learns how not what to think. Then class ends, the rider gets back on the elephant, and nothing changes at recess. Trying to make children behave ethically by teaching them to reason well is like trying to make a dog happy by wagging its tail. It gets casualty, sorry, it gets casualty backwards. During my first year of graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, I discovered the weakness of moral reasoning in myself. I read a wonderful book, Practical Ethics, by the Princeton philosopher Peter Singer. Singer is a humane consequentialist, shows how we can apply a consistent concern for the welfare of others to resolve many ethical problems of daily life. Singer's approach to the ethic of killing animals changed forever my thinking about my food choices. Singer proposed and justifies a few guiding principles. First, it is wrong to cause pain and suffering to any sentient creature. Therefore, factory farming, therefore, current factory farming methods are unethical. Second, it is wrong to take the life of a sentient being that has some sense of identity and attachments. Therefore, killing animals with large brains and highly developed social lives, such as other primates and most other mammals, is wrong. Even they could be raised in an environment they enjoyed and were then killed painlessly. Singer's clear and compelling argument convinced me on the spot, and since that day, I have been morally opposed to all forms of factory farming. Morally opposed, but not behaviorally opposed. I love the taste of meat. I love the taste of meat. And the only thing that changed in the first 6 months after reading Singer is that I thought about my hypocrisy each time I ordered a hamburger. That's how you do it. That is how you do it. But then, during my second year of graduate school, I began to study the emotion of disgust, and I worked with Paul Rosen, one of the foremost it's one of the foremost authorities on the psychology of eating. Rosen and I were trying to find video clips to elicit disgust in the experiments we were planning. And we met one morning. And we met one morning with a research assistant who showed us some videos he had. Found one of them was Faces of Death, a compilation of real and fake footages of people being killed. These scenes were so disturbing that we could not ethically use them. Along with the videotaped suicide and execution, there was a long sequence. So there was a long sequence shot instead. So there was a long sequence shot inside a slaughterhouse. I watched in horror as cows moving down a dripping disassembly line were belligerent, 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 belligerent. Belligerent. Bulldog. Legends. In They were bludgeoned. They were bludgeoned, hooked, and sliced up. Afterwards, Rosin and I went to lunch to talk about the project. We both ordered vegetarian meals. For days after, the sight of red meat quasi made me quasi. My visceral feeling now matched the sorry, my visceral feeling now matched the belief Singer had given me. The elephant now agreed with the rider, and I became a vegetarian. For about 3 weeks, gradually, as the disgust faded, fish and chicken uh, re-entered my diet. As the disgust faded, fish and chicken re-entered my diet. Then red meat did too. Although even now, 18 years later, I still eat less red meat and choose non-factory farmed meat when they are available. That experience taught me an important lesson. I think of myself as fairly rational person, as a fairly rational person. I found Singer's argument persuasive, but to paraphrase Mady's laments from chapter 1, I saw the right way and approved it, but followed the wrong. So I saw the right way and approved it, but followed the wrong. until an emotion came along to provide some force. The virtues of positive psychology, the cry that we have lost, our way is heard from some quarter in every century and era, but it has been particularly loud in the United States since the social turmoil of the 1960s and the economic malice and rising crime of the 1970s. Political conversation Political conservatives, particularly those who have strong religious belief, bridled at the value free approach to moral education and the empowering of children to think for themselves instead of teaching them facts and values to think about. In the 1980s, these conservatives challenged the education establishments by pushing for characters, it, for, by pushing